that Mecca now belonged to the Muslims. Anyone who was not Muslim was no longer welcome in Mecca. And those who, of the polytheists, of the kuffar, who still wanted to accept Islam, were given a time period to accept Islam and then move out. We didn't tell them to go and leave on the first day. Time was given. That's part of the rahmah of the deen. And also this Hajj of Sayyidina Abu Bakr was also a means for the Muslims to learn how to perform Hajj. Because inshallah what we'll be looking at tonight is the Hajj, the Hujjatul Wida of the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which took place the following year, in the 10th year after the Hijrah. So one thing to know, so the Hajj of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu happened in the 9th year of the Hijrah in Dhul Qa'dah. Was at the time, not Dhul Hijjah, which you might find a bit strange, was at the time the Arabs were still like playing around with the months. They would say when the next month would be. They weren't following a lunar calendar, they weren't following a solar calendar. They knew that there were X amount of months in a year, and these months had names, but they would shift these months to suit their needs. For some of these months, they recognized were sacred months, and they would say, even in the Jahiliyyah, Ayyam Jahiliyyah, in the days of pre-Islam, they would say still, well, this is a sacred month, we can't fight during this month, or this is a sacred month, we can't kill in this month. So they had some sort of an idea that there were these holy days, that there were these holy sacred months or times, but they would shift them around throughout the year to suit their own personal needs and goals, particularly with when to fight someone and when not to fight someone, etc. So during that, in that particular year, the time that Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, when the Hajj was in the month of Dhul-Qa'dah. But when the Prophet went on Hajj and performed his Hajj, it was in, as we know, Dhul-Hijjah. That's where we get our Hajj time from, following in the footsteps of the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there are different narrations as to exactly when and what day, etc. But we won't go into the nitty-gritty of such things. We're just looking at now the overall picture of this. And inshallah, I'll be looking at the farewell sermon of the Khutbatul Wida of the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And just for us to look at that and remind ourselves of that, which is really, it's a sermon that contains a lot of the Deen's principles, and it's less than a page long. So if we can familiarize ourselves with that, it will be a good reminder for any point in time for anyone. Alhamdulillah. But now coming back. So after from Medina, the Prophet arrived in Mecca. Well, not in Mecca per se, but in the region of Mecca on the 3rd of Dhul Hijjah. And they say the trip that Sallallahu took with his camel Qaswa lasted maybe about 3-4-5 days from Medina to Mecca. But just before entering into Mecca, the Prophet Sallallahu camped and spent the night at a place called Zeenatul, which is on the outskirts of Mecca. And then on the 4th of the Hijjah, say a Sunday morning, the Prophet made ghusl and left Mecca after Salat al-Fajr. And as soon as the Prophet entered the Masjid al-Haram, where the Haram of Mecca is now today, he made tawaf and did the sa'i, walked between Safa and Marwa. And they say that the Prophet did not finish the ihram, did not do the ghusl, as we say, because he was a qarin, which is a fiqh term related to a particular type of Hajj. When someone joins the Hajj and Umrah together. But that's for fiqh. We're not looking at fiqh right now. And then from there, the Prophet took what they call al-hadi, the sacrificial animals, the goats and the sheep and the cows and the camels that they were going to slaughter for Yawm Nahr. And those that of the ashab that didn't have any animals to sacrifice, they were ordered to say ihram and to do tawaf, and also do sa'i again. And then after that, they would, do the fellowship. And on the 8th day of the Hijjah, that is now Yawm al-Tarwiyah, the day of Tarwiyah, he, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then the 8th of the Hijjah left for Mina. And at Mina, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam made Salat al-Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, and Fajr of the 9th day of the Hijjah. And he stayed, made those 5 salawat, and stayed there until the sun rose quite a distance in the air. And from there, on the 9th day of the Hijjah, went to Arafah. So at Mina, the Prophet's tent was pitched at a place which you now can go visit. They built a masjid, it's called Masjid Khayr. Inshallah, now we'll grant the opportunity to go visit the And the Prophet also had a tent pitched on Arafah. And that place is called Namira, which we can also visit one day. And so after Zawal, he ordered that his camel, Qaswa, be prepared for him. And they got the camel ready, and he went down to the valley. And for the Prophet's Hajj, farewell Hajj, the narration say there were 140,000 people, 120, over 100,000 Muslims that were gathered around the Prophet. And that is where and when he gave his farewell speech of Khutbatul Wada'. And these places of Masjid al-Khayf and Masjid al-Namira, on the plain of Arafah, we can go visit, inshallah. And just when we go on Umrah, when we go on Hajj, we can look at these places and remember the Seerah, remember the history that took place. And remember that this is where the Prophet made his Hajj, where the Ashab made their Umrah and Hajj, where all our predecessors, our grandfathers, our great-great-grandfathers, even our own parents made their Hajj, their Umrah, where millions and millions of Muslims, millions and millions of mu'mins around the world moved on this part of the earth. Solely for the sake of Allah, solely to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, it's not a light thing, it's not a small thing, it's not a forgettable piece of history. Because that history is still alive today. In less than 4 months, it's going to be Ramadan. And in less than 4 months after Ramadan, it's Hajj. And not long ago, people want Hajj. So, time carries on. But history has this way of reminding us all the time, which, if we're not learning from our history, we need to repeat it, as they say. But, looking now at the Prophet's khutbah to Wada' is very well said. There are some things, as I said, that we can definitely learn from. And I want to now take from what Sheikh Raihan in his Fiqh al-Seerah as written regarding this farewell sermon. So he's broken it up into 6 clauses, 6 points from this khutbah to Wada', which I find very digestible and easy to understand, alhamdulillah. So Sheikh Raihan, he goes and he says if he was being inspired with knowledge of the perils and temptations to which his ummah would be subject as time went on, going astray by following others and losing sight of the guiding light which he placed in their hands. So the Prophet began his address with the words, O people, let your lives and your possessions be as sacred to you as this day, in this month, in this country of yours, until you meet your Lord. And this, same advice, the same admonition. See, he's also repeats it again at the end of the khutbah. And in this way, this is how the Prophet stressed the necessity of showing concern for this point. Because he continued to say, remember that every Muslim is a brother to every other Muslim. Hence, none of you shall take from his brother anything but what he has freely given. Do not wrong or oppress one another. In another narration or way it was said, the Prophet ﷺ also made it clear that it is unlawful for you to shed the blood of one another or take unlawfully from the wealth of one another. Um, and after this, the Prophet ﷺ asked the question, have I made myself clear? And to this, the Sahab, all those that were, Ashab, all those that were present, they said, indeed, you have, Ya Rasulullah, you have made yourself perfectly clear, and perhaps we today are the ones who most need to listen to you and respond, even if in doing so we are acknowledging the responsibility which we have enormously limited. So, the Prophet's first point was that Muslims should not kill, steal, or another. That their property, that their lives, that their honor, that their dignity is sacred, as they find their own honor and dignity and wealth sacred, as they find the Kaaba sacred, as they find Yawm al-Arafah sacred, as they find the day of Eid sacred, so should they find and treat each other with that same honor and dignity and respect. That was the first clause. The second clause, Sheikh Raihan goes on to say that the second clause is not only an admonition and piece of advice, but equally importantly, a decision which the Prophet ﷺ was announcing to those gathered around him and to the nations which were succeeding. Right? So the second point the Prophet ﷺ said, indeed, everything pertaining to the past, referring to Ayyam al-Jahiliyyah, everything pertaining to the past, time of ignorance, has been placed beneath my feet. Both the bloodshed during that time and the usual riba collected. So he is also saying all the practices of paganism and ignorance are now under my feet. The blood revenge on the days of ignorance, or the remitted and forgiven. The first claim on, and he is also saying that the first claim on blood that he abolishes is that of Ibn Rabi'ah bin Harith. And riba is forbidden. And he also makes the beginning of the remitting of the amount of riba which Abbas ibn Abu Talib is needing to receive. So, why this? What's the meaning of this decision to put everything that they practiced before Islam and all the riba that was there before Islam? What's the meaning of this to have this, metaphorically under the feet of the Muhammad? Because in effect, the Prophet is saying that all the traditions to which those in the pre-Islamic times clung to, and he says so tenaciously, and these practices that took pride in, the traditions associated with tribal zeal and loyalties, and these discriminations based on language and lineage and ethnic identity, and the people's enslavement of one another with chains of injustice and riba and usury, all of these things have been basically null and void. And he is, Sheikh Raihan is saying that, I'm quoting him, he's saying they are nothing but a rank corpse which God's law has buried deep in the earth. Yet, their place in the Muslims' lives is beneath their feet. There are atrocities which have seen their last, and errors which have fled from sight, and calamities needing to be submitted. And that's true. So in riba only traps someone, because they are then indebted to whoever they owe that riba to. And whoever incurs on the riba is creating a hardship, is essentially financially enslaving the next person. I mean, killing someone and physically harming them is obvious enough how bad it is, so I don't need to go and explain that. But by declaring such a break between corrupt pre-Islamic traditions and humankind's intellectual and cultural advancement, the Prophet Muhammad was proclaiming for the sake of posterity the world over that if someone who claims to have achieved intellectual progress goes digging up things out of his past, he will simply be lost again in the darkness and the ancient history, no matter what claim that person might make. So the first point the Prophet said that human life is sacred. The second point the Prophet said that everything that they had practiced before is now completely abolished. It means nothing. It's now void. It carries no weight bearing forward, going forward into the future. It's now clause 3, which is related to what I kind of mentioned at the beginning, that the Prophet announced that from that point onwards, they will be following the lunar months. And that is how the year will be divided, according to the lunar calendar. Because as I mentioned, we learned that the Arabs, prior to Islam, and even in the early days of Islam, they adopted the practice of performing the Hajj in a certain month, for example, Hijjah, but for 2 years. And then after those 2 years, they would perform it in another second month, like Muharram. And then 2 years after that, they would perform it in another second month. So they changed when and what to do, and which months are sacred, and what sacred act they'll do in those months. So the calendar for the Arabs before the dawn of Islam was essentially haphazard. That's why we refer to, or they used to refer to the year as a great event that happened in that year, and not necessarily the month that happened in that year. Like the Nabi Muhammad's birth, they refer to that as being an event that took place in the year of the elephant, the year that Abraham came to try to destroy the Kaaba, not necessarily Rabiul Awwal. The birthday of the Nabi Muhammad is referred to most often in the books as the year of the elephant. But that was then according to Arifin. But that was because the calendar for the Arabs before Islam was all over the shop. You couldn't say, okay, the first of January happened every single year. The first day of the year would happen, but it may not necessarily be in summer. They would have changed everything. And so when the Prophet ﷺ performed this Hajj, it happened in the month of Dhul Hijjah. And he then said, time still evolves as it did on the day when Allah created the heavens and earth. And in other words, he was commanding, reminding them not to manipulate the months, moving them forward or back. And at the same time, he was also saying that the Hajj would, from that day onwards, be performed only in the month of Dhul Hijjah. Because also recall the context. Quraysh controlled the city of Mecca. Within Mecca was the Kaaba. Since the time of Nabi Ibrahim, people were still making some sort of Hajj, some sort of pilgrimage to the Kaaba. What Quraysh did was monetize that. They made Hajj into a business of sorts. They made visiting Mecca during these holy times a business. So, in order to control the business, they somehow managed to control the time of Hajj. They dictated when pilgrimage would happen, and as such, they dictated then how the economy would flow during those times. Because that's what Quraysh was into. That was their business. One of the major aspects of the business. Because people, not only from the Arabian Peninsula, from Abyssinia, from Egypt, from Yemen, from all over would come to the Kaaba in Mecca that Quraysh controlled. So now the Prophet is saying, all the traditions of the past are completely done with, and now also ensuring that Hajj is going to remain in a fixed time. So the first three clauses, again to recap, the first was to honor, respect, and show dignity to your fellow Muslim. Because in the same way that you regard the Kaaba as sacred, the Quran as sacred, the city of Mecca and Medina sacred, Yawm al-Arafah sacred, in the same way that you regard these aspects of the deen sacred, human life is just as sacred. Respect and dignity is owed to everyone. And in that light, everyone is deserving. And so treat everyone with that. That was the first clause. The second clause was that everything that they had done before, all their past traditions, are completely ignored. They're rendered null and void. They mean absolutely nothing. The third clause or point was the fixing of Hajj and the following of the lunar calendar officially. Right. And now we get into the fourth clause. And this is something I think particularly today for the youth and for couples getting married, particularly the young men that don't want to get married. Here in this khutbah, the Muhammad is famously known to have said, "Ittaqullah fi nisa." have um, fear of Allah or have taqwa regarding and concerning how you deal with the woman folk, how you deal with your wives, how you deal with your mothers, your sisters, your daughters. So in this fourth point of the Khutbatul Wida', the Prophet ﷺ advised everyone who's listening, particularly the men folk, concerning the good treatment of women in general. And it was in the hadith as an nisa. And nisa is very specific in the sense that not men, women specifically. But it's also very general, very broad. Because any woman would then fit in that category, whether it's your mother, your wife, your sister, your daughter, anyone, your grandmother. The Prophet ﷺ advised everyone to treat their woman well. And then another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of you are those who are best of their families, and I'm the best of my family. So from that, we can also see that the treatment, especially from men towards their woman in their life, is very important. And in that short, concise sentence or two, the Prophet ﷺ did away with injustice which had been practiced against the woman before Islam. And it also affirmed the guarantee of women's human dignity as they are set forth in the precepts of Islamic law. And this point was worthy of reaffirmation due to the presence of those who had only recently accepted Islam. And just recently abandoned the pre-Islam traditions and the traditions of the Arabs before Islam was that they would neglect the woman, they would refuse to acknowledge any of the rights of the woman. And this wisdom, another aspect of it that the Prophet ﷺ gave attention to was ensuring that all the Muslims of all ages, of all generations, they would stay aware of the difference between the dignity and natural rights enjoyed by women under the protection of the law of Islam. So the major difference between women in Islam and women not in Islam is that Islam opposes completely any means or way by which that woman would be exploited or sacrificed or harmed or dealt with in an unjust manner. Islam seeks to protect women. The law of the deen seeks to ensure the safety and the well-being of the woman. And the Nabi Muhammad ﷺ emphasized that further in the statement. So going on to the fifth point of this khutbatul wida', the Prophet ﷺ presented to everyone who is present two sources of guidance, which if they followed and held steadfast to it, it would protect them from error and from despair, no matter what happens, no matter what issue or problem they had to face. And that would be as we know. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I have left among you the book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger, which if you hold fast to, you shall never go astray. And in saying this, the Prophet ﷺ presents this and guarantees all the succeeding generations after the Nabi Muhammad ﷺ and Ashab and the Tabi'een and the Tabi'een, that anyone and everyone following the Muhammad ﷺ, anyone that's holding fast the Quran and the Sunnah, who's following these and using these two things as the guide, that they will not go astray. But also in the Prophet ﷺ saying this, he's also affirming that no cultural development or time-bound custom can be given authority over the Quran and Sunnah. So no matter what tradition or cultural practice may develop over time, is halal as long as it does not contradict or go against something within the Quran and the Sunnah, as long as it doesn't go against an aspect of the deen. Anything and everything is halal as long as it does not go against something that has been made haram in the deen. That is one principle that the Usuli scholars, that scholars of fiqh try to use to apply, especially when we face with modern problems that the Quran and the Sunnah does not address, like Bitcoin, for example. And so in the sixth clause, the Prophet clarifies then the relationship that should exist between the Muslim ruler or the Khalifa and the subjects of the Muslim ruler. And as long as the Muslim ruler is leading and ruling on the basis of Quran and Sunnah, then the people that are following him are to grant the complete obedience without respect to his ancestry or appearance. So regardless of who is then chosen as leader, if a person is chosen as leader and they're following and leading with the Quran and the Sunnah, it doesn't matter where they come from or what they look like. Their haqq as them being chosen as leader must be given, because they are leading using the Quran and the Sunnah. However, the moment that this leader is found to be deviating from the Quran, from the Sunnah, is not leading with the haqq, for the haqq, then they don't deserve to be in that position. And there's no justification for loyalty or obedience to a leader who does not conduct himself on the basis of the Quran and the prophetic Sunnah. So at the end of all of this, the Prophet ﷺ also then asked the companions that were present for them to verify and acknowledge and affirm what he ﷺ said. And the Prophet ﷺ asked them, and if you were to ask about me, what would you say? And then they said, we bear witness that you have conveyed the message and discharged your ministry. You performed your duty, Ya Rasulullah. We witnessed that you did what Allah has commanded you to do. And the Prophet ﷺ was, then the Prophet ﷺ said, raising his forefinger and moved, towards the people, saying, "Oh Allah, bear witness." Because that made Nabi Muhammad ﷺ happy. Because imagine, just think about the Nabi Muhammad ﷺ's condition and how content the Nabi must have been. Because he ﷺ spent his youth and his entire life spreading the deen of Islam. And then at the end of it, 62 years later, to see the fruit of 62 years worth of work, 62 years worth of struggling, 62 years worth of making dua, to see that the people that he has given the message bear witness that he has delivered the message. Happy he must have felt in that moment that was then the success. That was essentially every prophet's dream. I mean, I think of Nabi Lut, not Nabi Lut, Nabi Yunus. He gave da'wah to his people, they rejected him. He said, "Khalas, I'm done with you guys. Assalamu alaikum." And then the whales followed him up. And he said, "Subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin." And he went back to his people, gave them da'wah, they all accepted. And that was the purpose of a messenger. The point of a messenger's existence is to deliver a message. And now still for the messenger to receive that affirmation and confirmation, that testimony that your message has been delivered successfully and we accept it and we acknowledge it. I mean, you can only imagine how happy, delighted that Nabi Muhammad must have been. And then the ayah from Surah Al-Ma'idah was revealed. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. And there was some debate about this ayah, saying it's the last ayah that was revealed, etc., etc., etc. But that's for tafsir class, inshallah. And so, after this event, the adhan was made by Bilal radiallahu anhu, and then he made a second adhan, and then the Prophet ﷺ made Salat al-Dhuhr and Salat al-Asr, and they say with no Salah between them. And the Prophet ﷺ then stayed on Arafah until after Maghrib, and then when the skies yellow color vanished a bit, and the disk of the sun disappeared, He left for Muzdalifah. So that was all happening now on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, Yawm Arafah. So after arriving at Muzdalifah, it's maybe just after Isha, the Prophet ﷺ made the Maghrib and the Isha, they say with one adhan and two iqam. And the Nabi stayed in Muzdalifah until it was Fajr, and then made the Fajr, Salat al-Fajr of one adhan and one iqama until it was almost close to daybreak. And then after making Fajr at Muzdalifah, he moved to al-Mash'ar al-Haram, and he faced Qibla, and then said Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, and stayed at Mash'ar al-Haram until just before Dhuhr, and then went back to Mina. And then, on his way to Mina, got to Mina, walked a little bit, and then went onto the road to get to, and Jawat al-Aqaba, the big Jawat, and belted 7 times with pebbles, saying every time Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And then from Mina, from the Jawat al-Aqaba, from the big Jawat, he went to the sacrificial place, the place where they would, slaughter the sacrificial animals. And they say he sacrificed 63 camels, and asked Ali to slaughter the rest. And the total came to 137 animals that were then slaughtered on Yom Nahar, in the Hajj of the Nabi Muhammad. And then a piece of meat from each of the slaughtered animals would then be cooked and then spread, and people ate and drank all that soup. So the night of Hajjah, Yom Arafah, stayed there until just after Maghrib, and from there went to Muzdalifah. Stayed at Muzdalifah till the end of the night of the Hajj, and woke up on the 10th of the Hajj, made Fajr, went to Mina, pelted the Jamarat al-Aqaba, and after that went to go slaughter the animals, and after that, left the sacrificial place where they slaughtered the animals. They went to Mina, and then from Mina went back to the Kaaba. He made Salat al-Dhuhr, and he came there, and the children of Abdul Muttalib were supplying the Zamzam, or giving the drinking water to the Hajjaj. Was that honor, that responsibility was still belonging to the tribe of Banu Hashim. As we said earlier, that when the conquest of Makkah happened, the keys to the Kaaba, the tribe that had that responsibility, kept that responsibility after the conquest of Makkah. And the tribe that was responsible for the well of Zamzam remained responsible for the well of Zamzam. So the tribe that had the key to the Kaaba would ensure the maintenance of the Kaaba still happened. The tribe that looked after the well of Zamzam, they made sure that any Hajj, anyone that was a Hajj, when it came to perform a Hajj, that they would ensure that that person brought Zamzam, that person had water to drink on this pilgrimage of it. And so, again, on the 10th of the Hajj, the Prophet delivered another speech. And in that one also repeated some of the things that he said the day before the night of the Hajj on Yom Arafah. And so, the days of Tashriq, the 11th, 12th, and 13th of the Hajj, the Prophet spent that in Mina, and did the ritual teaching of Islam, the dhikr, and following the guidance and advice and the teachings of Ibrahim, and also pelting the Jamarat in those days. And on the 13th of the Hajj, the Prophet left Mina and stayed at a high place on the mountainside at Al Kinana, and spent the rest of the day and night with the 13th of the Hajj. And he performed Dhuhr, Salat al-Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. And so on the 14th of the Hajj, the Prophet after resting for a little bit, went back to the Kaaba, performed Tawaf al-Wida, the farewell Tawaf, and instructed the companions to do the same, and then from there, on the 14th of Hajj, went back to Medina. Alhamdulillah. And so there's like so many things we can look at, but I just wanted to touch on the farewell sermon, khutbah al-wida of the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That summarizes essentially the principles of the deen. That, respect and dignity for all remains the same, no matter what. No matter where, no matter who you are, no matter who the other might be, you honor and you show respect to anyone and everyone, no matter where you are coming from or where they are coming from. Alhamdulillah. And so, on that note, I want to then let us conclude tonight's lesson, because next week, inshallah, will be the final presentation and we'll be looking at the lives of the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and some of the signs that led up to the passing of the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that will be quite emotional because it's our Nabi, our Prophet we are speaking about. And so, وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله